Well, good afternoon, good evening. This is Reverent Cooking episode 9, I believe it is. Tonight we're doing something a little healthier. I'm going to make it tasty, so it won't be quite as healthy as the original. But we are doing butternut squash soup. Just to let you know a little bit about butternut squash. Butternut squash is technically considered a winter squash. It's more like a gourd. It's very hard and firm. As opposed to like zucchini or the yellow corkneck squash. These are summer squashes. Summer squashes you can usually saute, you can fry them, you can stew them, those kind of things. Winter squashes, you're going to have to treat those more like a root vegetable. They can be roasted in the oven, which is what we're going to do for this. They can be put together into hash, they can be boiled and those kind of things. You just have to treat them differently. So I wanted to do that, just kind of give you a little piece on that. So we're going to start with, I've got my oven preheated to 450 degrees. These are smaller ones than what I normally use. I picked those out so that I could do a smaller batch. This is one of my favorite soups, especially the way I'm going to make it. My kids kind of like it, but they could live without it. They'd probably actually prefer we don't do it. So. But what you have to do is treat this kind of like you do a pumpkin. So you're going to cut off the top, and I cut off the bottom, and then you're going to slice it, stand it up, slice it down the middle, and I'm going to make sure I avoid that sticker. I need you to go ahead and take that sticker off. And you can see it's a harder fleshed squash. Once you take the sticker off, probably should have done this beforehand, then we're going to scoop out these seeds. Another squash that we really like to eat that's in the same kind of category is the acorn squash. We like those. We eat a lot of those, and we pretty much always roast those.
Spaghetti squash.
We also like spaghetti squash. Spaghetti squash does fit in this winter squash category. But again, like this, it's best if you roast it. And that's how you get those spaghetti, the inside flesh to look more like spaghetti noodles. So I've got this top and bottom cut off of this. Gonna split it down the middle, just like that. So you get a big half. We're gonna cut out those seeds, kind of like a pumpkin. And I'm gonna stick it on this pot here and roast it. Now I'm gonna pull out a bowl to put my seeds in. And my tops, I probably should have done that first or pulled over the trash can. If I was doing some bigger ones, I probably would have just pulled over the trash can. But like I said, these are smaller ones. And you just want to pull out, I'm going to pull it, take this up here. So you can see it's kind of got this stringy, darker or brighter orange color. You want to take that brighter orange membrane and all the seeds out before you roast it. Kind of like, it's a lot like a pumpkin. If you carve pumpkins around Halloween time, it has a lot of those same kind of characteristics. And this same method works for pretty much all winter squash. You could even make a pumpkin soup out of this. Melissa and I have talked about doing that before. We've never done it. You gotta have the right kind of pumpkin. Just like you have to have the right kind of pumpkin in order to do like a pumpkin pie out of it. Again, you want to roast it and mash the meat. So kind of get that out of there. Set that down there. We'll do this next couple of them. Once you get them, all the seeds out and the insides out, then you will want to sprinkle it with a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, not a lot. But you do that after you have coated it with a light coating of oil. We just did spaghetti squash over the weekend, and you kind of roast it. You can slow roast it and just kind of sit it in your oven for a little while and go off and watch a show or something like that. And this season with social distancing, you wouldn't want to watch a really long episode, because realistically, if you do it about 350, you'll want to roast it for about an hour. Like I said, I'm going to roast this at 450, and I'm going to roast it for about a half an hour. Because we're going to pull it out and it'll do the rest of its cooking in the soup itself. So we're got to get this part going, because this is what will hold up the process the longest. So get our butternut squash in, and then we'll move in to the part that makes it a little more tasty in my book, but I'll also give you an idea. I've been kicking around and looking at ideas for how to do this a little healthier. I think I've even got an idea for how to do this in a completely even vegan way. Although we eat a lot of meat around here, that doesn't mean that everyone who watches this does or would want to. And so you could do this without any meat whatsoever. You can do it without any meat products. I'm going to use a chicken stock here in just a little bit, but you could do it with just a vegetable stock. So, got my squash down. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on them. And I do this face up to start with, and then we'll flip them over for when we bake, just so that the meat doesn't burn. So we'll use some fresh cracked salt, sea salt, and then just a couple of grinds of fresh black pepper. So we'll do that. Turn these over upside down. That kind of helps keep the meat from burning. And then we will stick this in the oven and get moving on to the rest of the soup. So, like I said, if you do about 350 for an hour on larger ones, that works best. I'm doing this 450. I'm going to go ahead and set myself a timer for 25 minutes, and we're going to check it because those are a lot smaller than what I'm used to working with. And then the rest of the time, then we're going to assemble the rest of our dish. So, what this soup is, is we're going to start with some olive oil in the bottom of our big pan here. And then I have here, it's a half a cup of celery, half a cup of onions, and a half a cup of carrots. These are already pre-diced. Jessica, you just planted some butternut squash. We really like it. I only kind of enjoy eating. I have never roasted it though. Only cooked it on the stove top in butter. Now that's interesting. I'll have to try that, but we've never roasted it with butter. But we do eat it quite a bit of it. So I'm going to put this on medium heat. I've got my olive oil in here. Like I said, half a cup each, celery, onion, and carrot. We want to go ahead and roast those. If you were doing a pure vegan recipe of this, what you do is you would cook these down, get a little bit of caramelization on them, and then you would just add some water. You could add some other root vegetables if you wanted, some turnips, and maybe even some, if you want a little kick, a little radish. If you like beets, you could put beets in this. Beets are going to make it really red looking though, and then you just add water to make your stock. But what I'm doing is I'm going to use vegetable broth. I've got about 3 cups there, and then to make it taste a lot better, I'm using a roll of Italian sausage. To this, we're going to add a can of tomato paste, and I have here my own kind of Italian seasoning. This has 1 tablespoon of basil, 1 tablespoon of oregano, 1 tablespoon of parsley, and 1 tablespoon of garlic. Then we have 1 teaspoon of thyme, and a half teaspoon each of crushed red pepper flake and margarine. This is kind of my go-to Italian seasoning. I usually, Judith, I usually just get regular extra virgin olive oil. Sometimes we'll get just regular olive oil, not being extra virgin. The thing about extra virgin is it's a little clearer, and so it heats up, I think, a little faster, but I don't know that. I don't really know the difference between a regular olive oil and an extra virgin olive oil. All I know is you probably are paying for that extra virgin. It's probably a younger olive, so it's a little easier to produce, but it probably also doesn't produce as much. So, I'm going to get me, because I'm going to be cooking sausage in this here in a little bit, I want to get me a spoon with a flat edge because I want to be able to chop this up. So we've got this right here is Mirepoix, or the French Trinity. If you were down in New Orleans, they would actually trade out the carrots for bell pepper, and we've used all 4 before as well, sometimes in our cooking. And I use all 4 whenever I'm making gumbo. I know some of you have been to one of our open houses and had the gumbo before. That's kind of the base of what I start with a gumbo soup. So again, we're going to let these cook. We want to actually cook these as thoroughly as we can, because one of the things about this soup is it's going to end up being about the texture of a gritty tomato soup. Now, for me, we went out a couple years back and we got an immersion blender. So for me, this is actually going to turn into almost a puree, almost exactly like a tomato soup. Hi, Melissa. Melissa, say, she's waving at everybody. But you don't have to have the immersion blender to do it. You could do it in a food, like just a regular blender, or if you want to keep, or a food processor, or you can just kind of do a rough mash, and it's more of a hearty, chunky soup then. But I kind of like that thinner texture, and we're actually going to be using this kind of like an appetizer soup for tonight. Melissa is actually fixing the rest of our dinner, I think, out on the griddle. So, or I might just be making this and then we'll finish up dinner in here. But I'll show you the finished product when I'm done. So, again, you want your onions to completely cook through, and really for the celery and the carrots, we want them as soft as possible. Now, when you cook them with once you put the sausage in and the chicken broth, that'll help cook it down too. But the more of the cell walls you can break down at this stage, the easier it's going to be later on. Carrots in particular, I probably, if I wasn't looking at time, I probably would have put my carrots in first because they're the hardest, and then I would have added in the celery, and then I would have finished with the onions because they'll cook kind of in that order. Green pepper, if you were using green pepper in a dish like this, you put it in about the same time as the onions. They both cook about at the same speed. They're about the same hardness, I would say. And like I said, the butternut squash is kind of like the carrots. It's you treat it more like a root vegetable with those winter squash. And usually they're at their best. You get the best ones in the fall. That's why they're called a winter squash, just like you get the best summer squash, zucchini, and yellow squash in the early summer, midsummer. By the time you get to late summer, a lot of times they start to get a little not quite as good a quality. That doesn't mean you can't get them. And of course, we live in a world where they grow stuff down in Mexico and they'll grow it up north and they'll ship it everywhere. So we can get most vegetables pretty much all year long. But they're absolutely at their best whenever you can get them locally and you can get them in season. So even though these are a winter squash and they're best, late September, early October, we can get them now. They're good. So I'm still here. I put some salt on this. Actually, I'm going to do a little bit more salt on here because I want to get these vegetables to break down. The interesting thing about salt, salt on vegetables actually will adhere itself to the wall, and it will cause the cell walls of the vegetables to kind of tear a little easier. That's why if you're wanting to like sweat an onion, put some salt on it, and it will cause it to cook a lot faster. And so, see, you can already start to see this is starting to soften up some, and getting a really good smell. Actually, these carrots were a lot better than what I thought they were. We just got a lot of times anymore. You can get the big bags of carrots, and they do well, but a lot of times you can just get a good deal on the baby carrots, the little fingerling carrots, and just kind of chop those up as well. Of course, ideally, we would be growing these things in our garden. Melissa and I used to have a really big garden before I went into ministry, and we lived in Plainville. We had a nice big backyard, and we could garden in it. But since we've been living in Parsonages, most of the time it's really hard to have a good garden spot, so we haven't done much with that. Jessica, unless you guys have really upped your game, you guys had a decent garden spot, I know, at the house that you bought while we were up there in Mount Etna. So this is about done. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add my sausage. Now, part of what I want to do in order to cook that is I'm going to pull out these vegetables, and we're going to stick them back in once the sausage is about done. So I've got my bowl here that I had originally put them in. So I'm going to pull out these vegetables, and they're going to keep cooking. Anytime that you pull something from the heat, it's still going to have that residual heat that's going to allow it to cook some more. and it will continue to cook. And then, like I said, we'll also put those back in at the end of cooking the sausage, and so they'll continue to cook there. So I want to go ahead and open my sausage, and like I said, this is a nice Italian sausage. Probably, I'm probably going to go ahead and cook the whole thing, but I want to set half of it aside because those are kind of small squash. You really need as much of that meat in here, and but we don't use a whole lot of Italian sausage, so I'm just going to open this package up and we'll get this cooking. So like I said, I've got a couple more episodes that I want to do with you all. I've been trying to think and pray about what God wants me to do. One of the things, if you follow us on Facebook, you know that we've been posting, or I've been posting pictures of our daily walks. We're trying to get in a good 3.5 miles, and as a good friend of mine said, the reality is if you want to be healthy, exercise, walk, do strength training, those kind of things. But if you're wanting to lose weight, it's more in your diet. Weight loss has more to do with what you eat and taking in less calories than what you burn, whereas exercise really affects how you feel. I know even though those walks, they're all here in town, but we kind of live here on the river bend, and so realistically it's about 3 tiers down to the river walk there, if you look at those maps. And so that those hills add in quite a bit. It was kind of up, when I was up north in northern Indiana, that's whenever I learned about what a river valley actually was. I mean, I grew up right on the White River. The branch that goes through downtown Indy went about a half a mile from my house growing up. But everything around us was flat. And so, when the river would come up, it would go everywhere. But up there in the north, it'll be flat, flat, flat. It'll drop, a couple hundred feet, and you go about a quarter mile to the river, and then it'd go another quarter mile and up. And that was the river valley. I did not realize just how much that was the case until you got up north. Down here, the river does not act that way. On the Kentucky side where we're at, it's a little flatter, but we've got about 3 different tiers where the river comes up, and so we would never, if it had ever flooded our house, the world would be in trouble. We need to build a Noah-sized boat, so we're not too concerned about it. But a couple of years back, we did have another big flood, and they had the floodgates in, and we kind of had to watch where we went. Some of our people who live out in the county, they kind of got cut off and had to go different routes. So anyway, that was interesting rabbit trail. We're cooking down the sausage, and you want to chop this as fine as you can at this stage. That will help keep your soup in a nicer thickness later. It'll be easier to make sure that you get it all kind of pureed down. Some people, if you were just making like a regular soup that was not a pureed soup, you may want bigger chunks so that you can kind of see what you're eating a little bit more. It's really kind of up to your preference on that, but because this is more of a pureed soup, much more like I said, a tomato soup, a tomato bisque kind of thing, I want this sausage as fine as I can get it, so that I don't work my immersion blender too hard at the end. How you all doing? I hope that you're enjoying this. I hope if you've been watching some of these videos along the way, I hope that you've enjoyed, just kind of seeing me in the kitchen, me at the grill. If you've got some ideas of things you'd want me to fix, don't hesitate to put those in the comments or send me a message. Had a couple people who've even said, well, what about cooking together? I wouldn't mind going to someone's house and cooking with you, for you. I know Grant has talked about maybe joining me at some point today. I think he took his AP Calculus final, so he may actually be done. I know he graduates officially here in a couple weeks, so he might join me And like I said, I've got a friend here in the church who just got a new kitchen, and he invited me out to cook at his place. I'll probably do, like I said, he's got a convection oven, so I'll probably do my cookie episode out there. I will give you a basic recipe, but I, as most of you know, I don't give away the full recipe on that. Jathan, you're on Jessica's account. Well, I sent you a happy birthday wish the other day on your account, but I'm glad to know that it's you. I've seen some of your pictures from your kids and you guys hunting. I hope, are you guys still living in the same place? It'd be neat to see how you guys have developed that, because I know, you know, when you first bought it, you had some ideas for what you want to do long term at the house and those kind of things. So the sausage is just about done. You want to get, thing about sausage is because it is pork, you have to cook this all the way through. So you want to make sure it's kind of an even, because this is a store-bought sausage, you want to make sure it's an even brown all the way through. I'm going to let this cook a little bit longer, and then I'm going to put my vegetables back in, and then we'll move forward.
I need seasonings for your...
You need seasonings. All right, sorry guys. Steak seasoning and garlic herb seasoning. And you may want this for the pork and beef. So, all right. Kind of move this back. I know, Jathan, a lot of the people down here have been posting turkey pictures, and I know you used to go turkey hunting every year. I don't remember what part of Kentucky you went to, but it'd be neat to see you guys if you guys ever come down this way. We're kind of more towards, we're not too far from Owensboro is where we're at now. But so sausage is basically done. It is completely browned all the way through. There might be a couple pieces in here that aren't completely cooked yet, but we will, it'll finish cooking with the soup. So I'm going to add my vegetables back in, and we're going to continue to cook that. According to the oven, we got about 9 minutes before the squash is done, so we're doing pretty good on time. So to this, we're going to kind of let all this cook a little bit more. Like I said, I've got that can of tomato paste waiting in the wings, and you know what? I said I was going to save some of this sausage out, but I already threw my vegetables in. So I guess we're just going to have extra sausage in my butternut squash soup tonight. I don't mind that. Melissa is not a big sausage fan, so I don't know if she'll eat some, but we've got some friends that are coming over either tonight or tomorrow, and so I'll let them try it, and they don't mind sausage, so I'll put this together, and it'll still be a really good soup. So, go ahead and I'm going to pull this. Like I said, the interesting thing my dad taught me about a can of tomato paste is if you open the top and the bottom, then it comes out a whole lot easier. And then I'll just grab we have a thin spatula. This one will work. So, got a little bit of tomato paste on there. We'll go ahead and just scrape this out. Scrape it from both ends. And make sure to get all that out of there. So, actually I'll just use this and use my sausage to get that off. So, sausage is in, veggies are in, my tomato paste is in. We're going to kind of mix this up in here. My Italian seasoning blend here that I talked about earlier, all that goes in. This is going to get really aromatic here in a second. It's going to smell really good. It smells a lot like, it kind of smells like a pizza sauce almost. You could add a little bit of sugar if you want this a little sweeter. That doesn't bother me a bit, so I'm going to let this kind of cook together. And like I said, you're wanting to stir this up good. It's kind of start to look like a little bit of a paste, and that's okay, because it's at this point in time that we're going to add in our vegetable broth, and it'll really start to thin down. Now, you can do yourself, no luck this year. COVID shut us down. Oh, I'm sorry. We are on the other side, south of Cincinnati. Yeah, that's a little bit the wrong direction. It's probably actually faster for me to go visit you guys back up in around Mount Etna instead of meeting you over there. So we're going to add in all that chicken stock, about 3 cups worth. Normally I use about 4 cups, but because I'm also using a larger butternut squash. But these two, like I said, I got 2 smaller ones today that I'm using. And so this is really, now at this point in time, I'm going to turn up my heat a little bit to about medium high. And I'm actually going to stir this up, make sure I break this all down. And I'm going to pull this off so you guys can see this. Kind of do that nice little camera flip and show you. So here's the soup. It doesn't look very appealing at this point in time, but again, like I said, we're going to end up blending this so it'll be more of a pureed soup. I just want to get this started to a boil, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the lid on it and turn this back around, get our lid on it, and let it simmer. Because at this point in time, our goal is actually to get those vegetables and that sausage as soft as we can. Again, like I said, since this is going to be a pureed soup, you want to make sure that it is easily pureed. The last thing you want to do is try and use your immersion blender and basically trying to juice your carrots and your celery and those kind of pieces. So salt, all of our seasonings are in here. We're going to bring this up to a boil, and as soon as that is done, or up to a boil, I'll turn it down to about medium low. We've got about 4.5 minutes left on our butternut squash. When that is done, we'll take that out. I'll use a hot pad and I'll actually go ahead and get that ready. So what I do is I'll take this hot pad and some, like this, put on it a nice double layer of the paper towel so I can put my butternut squash in here, and I'll use a knife, and I want to go ahead and cube it. And so we'll cube those butternut squash up, go ahead and put them in here. We'll just do it as it goes. This has already started to boil, so I'm going to turn this down to about medium-low heat and let that continue to simmer. We'll go ahead and clean up a little bit while we're doing this. Put our dishes up and go ahead and take our trash over here to the trash can. I'll be right back, guys. So our soup is simmering. Our butternut squash is finishing up in the baking. And then, like I said, what we'll do is we'll slice those butternut squash up. We'll cube them up, put them in here, let them cook for just a couple of minutes, just to kind of let it marinate together. Then we'll use our immersion blender and puree the whole thing. And it will actually thicken pretty quick as you do that. And we're about maybe 10 minutes from done. So apart from the fact that I already had my carrots, onions, and celery already pre-diced, and I had already preheated the oven, you could probably make this soup start to scratch in about 45-50 minutes max. It's a really nice soup. It's really nice like in the late fall when it starts to get cool, or even in the winter months. It's been kind of cool down here for the last couple of days. I mean, we actually had those freeze warnings over the weekend, so still feels cool enough that I feel like I can do it, and I want this soup. And so we saw some nice butternut squash and we went for it. Any questions about what we're doing or any other thoughts? There's a handful of you guys watching. Can't really make out the icons to see who all is watching or joining, but Jathan, I wondered about your turkeys and those kind of things. If you got some good recipes you'd want to share with us about wild turkey. That yet to actually. I always said that was one animal that if I was going to go hunting, I'd be interested in hunting was wild turkey. And but of course, I know that they say pretty much only the breast is what you want to eat on those. So, but we'll see. Maybe one of these days. If you've got it, anything else you'd wanted to talk about, I wouldn't mind answering questions or kind of dealing with those kind of things. Like I said, also I would love to have some ideas of what to cook. I think someone suggested a chicken cordon bleu. That's not something we eat a lot around here. Melissa's not a big pork fan. Ham, this with sausage in it is because I put the sausage in it. She won't touch it, but I'll probably give that a try. With the skin of the squash. So with the skin of the squash, realistically, I'll just toss it. I'm sure you probably can eat it, but I don't, and so I'll cut that out. Cube the squash in the skin. Use the skin kind of to help protect my hand a little bit. Then I'll throw those skins away. So we got 30 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and pull this out and check on our squash. Ooh, they're bubbling good. How I check the squash is I'm just going to get a fork. I want to take one of these and flip it over. Ooh, ha ha ha. And I'm just going to stab it. That's not too bad actually. I'm kind of surprised. So we're going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to use the paper towel to line my my hot pad here. I'm going to grab one of these, stick it on there, grab my knife, and so realistically you're kind of going to hold it and just kind of slice through the flesh and cube that up. We may have to stick this back in the oven just a little bit. It's still a little hard, but maybe if I go ahead and cube it, that will help with the baking side of it too. So again, I just kind of slice this way, and slice this way. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's a lot more done than what I thought. See how it's kind of falling apart there as I slice through it? I know some people actually like to use the butternut squash and make a hash out of it. They'll add it with like hash browns and potatoes. So I'm going to go hold this and just kind of scrape it out of its skin and right into the pot. If you get a little bit of skin, it probably won't hurt it any, but I don't like to eat it normally, so I'm just gonna make sure that I get as much of that out as I can. We would just deep fry in Kentucky. You know, we did our chicken Kentucky fried. It's not really Kentucky fried, of course. You could call it Kentucky fried chicken. Did my fried chicken recipe about a week and a half ago now, and I know turkey really does fry pretty well, so it's not surprising that that's how you guys do it. It would probably keep it a lot juicier. So you can see how the skin just really kind of peels off. It's a lot easier to do if you were to go ahead and bake this up in advance and let it cool, and then you can pull the skin off and just use a cutting board and just kind of chop it up on the cutting board. I want to see if I can do that over here. I was going to try and do this a little faster. I was going to try and keep this under about a 45-minute video. We'll see if I can still do that or not. But skin peeling off pretty easy. And the interesting thing about this squash compared to like spaghetti squash or like a pumpkin is its skin is actually fairly thin. Like I said, that's probably what like a potato, in that you can eat the skin if you really wanted to. We don't. I like the flavor of butternut squash. I think for some it's more of an acquired taste. We did this probably the first time when I was in Oakland City. When I was an undergrad, I think I made this for the first time. We saw somebody do it probably on the Food Network. maybe been like Paula Deen or someone like that. So, and I remember making this for our lunches down there. It's not something that, like I said, the kids like real well, so we don't fix it very often. So we're gonna put that one in. We've got 3 more halves to go, and then just kind of let that cook down. Go ahead and flip these over, let them kind of cool a little bit. Grab our fork. Go ahead and, like I said, do a fine dice. And then cube it so that it'll continue. It's going to continue to cook with the rest of our soup, and that will help. And then, like I said, once you puree it, it'll cook even a lot faster. So kind of do that rough chop on it. And I've seen someone do this before, but I've never done it. Once you chop it, then you can kind of slice through the bottom of the meat and just kind of pull it out. If you leave, I guess, a little bit with the skin, it's not a big deal. I'm going to pull off that skin right there. So, and we're really close to done on this. So once I get all this butternut squash in, then we will go ahead and puree it, and it'll basically be ready to serve then. I'll probably actually you could serve this kind of as a gazpacho, a cold soup, if you wanted to. Like I said, it's kind of in that tomato soup or bisque soup kind of category. So it's really kind of, it can be a nice hot soup. You could serve it like tomato soup with like some grilled cheese or a hot ham and cheese. Or you could just eat it by itself. You can do that as well. I wonder if I could just do this. Like I said, normally I'll kind of do this in stages. I'll bake the butternut squash, and then I'll let it cool completely, and then I'll peel it from its skin, and then do the others, the rest of it as a second phase. But I kind of wanted to do this all in one video for you all. I considered going ahead and just pre-baking the butternut squash, and then coming back and doing it the rest of the video. But you learn a little bit. This whole in the COVID season, as you pointed out there, Jason, the reality is everything's a little different. And so this is, I used to cook a whole lot more. Like I've told some people, and I think I may even made this comment on one of my other videos. I originally was looking at opening my own restaurant before I re-answered my call in the ministry. We were 23, I think, at the time, and I had about a 10-year plan to open a restaurant. I wanted to open a Cajun restaurant, actually, and I had kind of my menu put together and my business plan, and so I was just collecting the skills and starting to talk to people about investing in it. But we would have had to move. We lived in a small town by the name of Plainville. That's where I grew up. And of course, you weren't going to have a fancy restaurant in a town called Plainville. It just isn't going to happen. So we kind of were raising our kids and going to church and doing that kind of stuff. And so I was kind of having my ideas, and then next thing you know, God says, "No, I got a different plan for you, Samuel. You're going to the ministry." And so I kind of moved cooking from being my career plan into a hobby, and we cooked quite a bit when I was an undergrad. But whenever I went off to seminary, I helped out with some meals on campus. But it's about that time that I stopped cooking for the fun of it. Still cooked occasionally. Melissa does most of the cooking now in our family, and she is a great cook. She's a really good cook. But I still like to cook, and I still do it occasionally. This is kind of my way of getting back into cooking as a hobby, and that's why, like I said, I'm willing to try just about anything. If you guys wanted me to make it, I'll do some research and find a way to do it here through the video. But it may be one of those, if it's something terribly difficult, I'll have to pre-record. If you go over to my YouTube channel, Reverent Cooking, and subscribe. I've got at least one bonus video on there. I'm going to try and do at least one live video a week through Facebook like this, and then I'll go ahead and post it to the YouTube channel. And then I'm also going to try and do at least one straight to YouTube, where I'll maybe edit it down and make it a quicker video, a shorter video, just kind of show the steps and kind of bypass some of the talking and the explaining. So make sure I don't make sure I'm not missing any comments. So I got one more half left to go. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and give this a good stir. Make sure that this is still cooking down. We want to make sure all our butternut squash cooks down well. And so this is actually, I mean, it's not as easy as if it was cool, but it's working pretty well. To go ahead and cube it and then kind of slice along the skin once it's flattened out. So like there. And now kind of come along here and slice along my skin. There's some good chunks of the meat here. Some of it's done enough that it's just kind of falling off the skin. That's really how you want it. And like I said, that takes about a good hour baking in a 350 oven will get you that. We did our spaghetti squash. I think I baked it at 400 and I baked it for about 45 minutes. And so we'll finish this up, and then I will do my pureeing and we'll show you our final soup here. Like I said, this is one of my favorite kind of cool weather dishes. We don't eat as much soup as we used to. We used to eat a lot of soup, but
it makes too much.
It makes too much as our kids are kind of getting older. Leah is home for the summer right now, but she's getting ready to start her senior year at Ball State. Blake comes home about every other weekend, but he's living with my parents as he's working. Grant graduates, like I said, here in just a couple weeks, and then he's planning on going to IUPUI up there in Indianapolis, and we'll be left with just Madison as our senior. So, putting it all back together, all of our butternut squash is in the pot now. Just kind of going over the recipe. This is for butternut squash. I baked it for about 30 minutes at 450 degrees. Just put a little bit of light olive oil, salt, and pepper on it. Then we sauteed up onions, celery, and carrots, about a half a cup of each. Cooked those till they were just getting tender. Then I pulled those out, browned a pound of Italian sausage, put my veggies back in, put in a can of tomato paste, and my Italian seasoning mix. And I'm going to go ahead and pull this off just so you can see. If you want 3 cups of chicken broth, and you could serve it, I'll go ahead and turn this camera around. You could serve it just like that. It's a nice, hearty, rich soup. Or, as I'm going to do, we're going to grab here my immersion blender and stick that in there. And I'm going to see if I can do this. Pull out my spatula. And we're going to see how you can already see it's thickening up. I would say if you really wanted to, you could almost serve this on a piece of like toast with some mozzarella cheese and kind of make it like a mini pizza sandwich. So I'm going to kind of blend this up, and I'm going to put you guys back up on the stand so that you don't have to be so close to hearing that grinding sound, and then I will show you the final product here in just a second. We are almost done. So this is a very rich soup. I don't mean rich like sweet, but just it's a very thick soup, a very hearty soup. This is probably the correct term for that. You could even take this and stick it in like a crock pot and just kind of let it continue to cook down on low throughout the day and have it ready for you like at the end of the day. One thing about an immersion blender is you want to watch how high you get it. You want to make sure you're keeping the stuff underneath. If you get pockets of air, it'll start to splatter and splash. Otherwise, it'll just blend as it goes. So I learned that the hard way early on when we first got this. This is probably, I think, our second immersion blender we've had in the last maybe 12 years or so. Hear how it got quieter? That's kind of the sound you want. So, all right. So, I think my soup is about done. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. Take my blade off. Go ahead and grab a spoon here. Give it a good taste. Oh yeah, that is very good. So I want to go get a nice bowl so you can kind of see how thick it is. Unlike a lot of soups where you need a ladle for this one, you can just use a big spoon. So you can see how thick that is. Actually, I probably should have done that the other direction. So there you go. See, it's a nice, thick, hearty soup. Butternut squash soup, one of my favorite winter squash dishes. Has kind of that, I almost think of it as a pizza soup. It's kind of how it tastes. You don't even taste the squash at all. It kind of gets masked by a lot of those Italian flavors, but love this soup. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll put this on YouTube. We'll see you guys later.